This with me because she's been covering for me a lot. I've had bronchitis, and so she's really had to pick up the slack in the last week and a half. And I don't have Gwen Stubbelow, the CASA program director, because her and three of the coordinators went out to the National CASA conference, and we're supposed to fly home yesterday. And so they got delayed. So hopefully they saw a little bit of Seattle, given that their flights were canceled and rescheduled for today. So Gwen said good luck, and so anyway, let's go ahead and get started. I'd like to do a couple things today. I'd like to go over some of the administrative stuff that has happened and how that impacts you, including the attorneys for the children in Sussex. Then I'd like to kind of talk about OCA and our history and go through the statute, how it looked and how it looks now. And then I want to talk to you substantively about some of the changes that have happened and what your role is. You do have in your packets, what we've put together is a new guide. I'm going to be referring to a bunch of stuff in this guide today. A lot of it you already know and will be a refresher, and I'm not going to go through details of that. I want to talk primarily about the changes, but what we decided when we did the guide is really to put everything in there that might be helpful to you and to new CASAs joining the program. In the appendix are a lot of good things, including the new law, and I will be taking you through that in a few moments. But first, let me start with telling you about kind of some of the more administrative stuff. So first of all, our locations in all three counties. One of the things that I really believe strongly in is, first of all, we don't have county-based programs. We have a state office of the child advocate, and we don't have a CASA program and an office of the child advocate. We have one state agency, and we all work together, and we're a statewide agency. As such, we do have three locations because obviously we can't all work in one location, but in terms of things that you may see improving or supporting you, we really are looking for statewide policies and procedures and taking the best from everyone. And of course, Sussex has a lot of best to offer the other counties. As far as locations, Missy and Lauren moved into our office, which is right behind the family court, 6 West Market Street. They officially moved in about a week and a half ago, although they had begun, I think, putting stuff that they weren't using there before. And I applaud Lauren in particular because apparently before she even went out, she took the time to decorate her entire office, and it makes the rest of the people in the office look very shameful. Because it is absolutely beautiful, and there are bare walls, and I just came down today and I was like, you, look at this office, all right? You've got to do something. Lauren has put you to shame, and she just gave birth to a second child. In Kent County, our offices are continuing. The family court allowed us to continue to have an office there, as we had an office in the family court in Kent County before CASA relocated. So now we were able to move to the second floor suite. So for any of you who do also volunteer in Kent County, first of all, we're very appreciative and grateful for you doing that. Kent County is our largest growing county, and to the extent that any of you are willing or able to take cases in Kent. But we also have a very nice office there. We have a second floor suite, I will call it. And there's a conference room the family court allows us to use, as well as plenty of space for the attorneys and the coordinators. In Newcastle County, I was just talking to Tina, because we go way back, but I was telling her that we are still at 900 King Street, which was the old family court building where we moved in when the family court moved out in 2005. And we are looking, what we have currently done is move the CASA staff into our office. We are jammed in there like sardines, okay? We are renovating the 3rd floor, and it will be about 6 to 9 months. So if you see any of the Wilmington staff or volunteers, know that we're in a transition in Wilmington, and it's a little close quarters right now, but we're doing the best that we can. Some of the things that we have already implemented, we have started with a statewide CASA coordinator. And so that person eventually is going to be handling today is handling all the case assignments and screening up petitions, taking that off of the coordinator so that they have more time to directly support you. They're also going to be making sure that we take the best of the best and are having trainings that look the same no matter what county they're in, whether they be the new CASA training or the in-service trainings. And we have all kinds of ideas. Gwen and I and Kelly had the opportunity to go look at North Carolina's program back in the fall. And we got some great ideas about additional recruitment and retention efforts, and we hope to be able to employ them both through the county-based as well as the statewide coordinators. So we're very excited about that. We also are sharing database systems and are really able to provide reports and details on cases that we have not been able to do in the past, and I think it'll make the coordinators' lives easier because they won't have to be manually counting cases, but it makes your lives easier because you're going to be able to have more support directly from your coordinators. Not that you don't already get a ton of support from the coordinators in Sussex.
Susan, you
Yes.
said that there's a statewide person assigning cases.
Yes.
And do we have a name of that person?
Yes, her name is Megan Caudill.
Okay.
And so what happens is she works with our, and this is kind of a neat piece, and I don't even think all of our staff totally understand it yet. But what happens when a new petition comes in, no matter what county it's in, it will come to Megan and the person that does the OCA assignments. Her name is Liz Fillingame. And Megan and Liz work together to say, okay, who's going to pick this up? Are we going to have this child attorney paired with a CASA volunteer? Are we just going to do a full-time deputy? Or are we going to do it? And I'll talk to you about the 3 different kinds of appointments that could happen. But they work together, and then they do all the initial paperwork. They're submitting that to the court. That takes that off of your coordinators. Your coordinators obviously are contacting you and saying, can you take this case?
Mm-hmm.
But those procedural things, we're hoping to have a very streamlined approach. Anyway, okay, so some of the other things that have happened is the court orders. So as you may or may not be aware, we had to have new court orders in all of your cases because of how the statute changed, which I'll go over in a few minutes. So we inundated the court statewide with about 370 new court orders. The thing that would be exciting, perhaps not to you, but I think it's exciting, is that now you and the attorney are on one court order. I don't know if you remember in the past, you would get one order appointing you and one order appointing the attorney. It's a consolidated order. What also happened is that now we have shifted things around. I assume you all know this, that Jen Klein will be handling all of Judge Jones's cases, as well as Judge Very in Kent County. And that Bliss Suicek will be handling all Judge Millman and Judge Ryan. So you will know if I'm assigned Judge Millman case, that I'm getting Bliss on my case, okay? And the reason we have done this statewide is it really helps attorneys who are under contract to have predictability in their schedule. It also helps us to manage the numbers to make sure there's equity, again, statewide, not just county, but statewide, to make sure that they're carrying the appropriate number of child cases and volunteers, okay? And there was a great disparity that was occurring that we hope that we have addressed. So in terms of Sussex County, you still have Bliss and Jen, which is great. I assume that's great. We think it's great. And that's how their cases will be handled moving forward. All right, so that's kind of, I think, the procedural stuff that really directly impacts the CASA volunteers. What I'd like to talk to you about next is I'm going to go through the OCA legislation, but I want to talk to you about the 3 ways that kids get representation in this state now before I do that. But I just want to point you to page, I apologize, it's the first appendix, and it starts on page 30, is the OCA statute. But let me start out by saying, all right, so the most significant change, as you may or may not have heard, and it's interesting, when we did the in-service in the other 2 counties, we did it before the relocation happened. So you guys are kind of, especially for those of you who have already gone to court, and like, all right, much ado about nothing. All right, we get this. Let's continue doing the great work that we're doing on behalf of kids. We got Jen, we got Bliss, we're going to court, we're advocating on behalf of children, we're doing all the same stuff. And really, that's the short story of this today. Okay, but what the legislation did, and the most significant change that impacted you, is that it went from saying, it says every child in DSCYF custody gets a lawyer, okay? And the 3 ways they can get a lawyer is they either get a lawyer by a full-time deputy child advocate employed by Office of the Child Advocate. These lawyers do nothing else but represent kids. They carry an average caseload of 35 kids at any given point in time. And they are like the CASA volunteer, the CASA coordinator, and the former CASA attorney, now called the child attorney, all wrapped into one. Okay, so they're the ones, they go out, they do what you guys do in terms of going to the best interest meetings at the schools and, making sure the kids, having visitation and all that stuff that you do, they do as well. So they're all three. So that's the one way you can get represented. The second way you can a child can get represented is through a volunteer attorney. All right, so we have about 300 attorneys who are Delaware attorneys who volunteer to represent kids. Most of them you will not see because they're in Newcastle County. Because we have very few volunteer lawyers in Kent and Sussex County. And it's not because Kent and Sussex County aren't awesome counties. It's not because the lawyers in those counties are not awesome lawyers. It's because there are only about 100 attorneys in each Kent and Sussex County who are members of the Delaware Bar and who are allowed to take cases. And they get tapped for all kinds of court appointments all the time. So their time is limited. But in Newcastle County, we have about 3,000 attorneys, okay? Because there's a lot of big law firms, and so a lot of them volunteer their time to represent kids. And when they do that, they again get only one case at a time, like you guys do. I mean, I know some of you take more than one, and that's amazing. And some of them do too, but for the most part, they get one case. And they, again, are the CASA volunteer, the CASA coordinator, and the attorney all wrapped up in one. So they do everything, okay? And then the third way a kid gets represented as of March 6th is they get appointed, and all of these attorneys are called child attorneys now under the law. They get appointed an attorney who is under contract with the Office of the Child Advocate and who works in conjunction with an appointed CASA volunteer. So it's a new way of framing exactly what you've always been doing, with one change. Now that lawyer, Jen and Bliss, represent the child. They don't represent you. Okay? You work in conjunction with them. You're helping them. You're out in the field. You're doing everything you've been doing. You're partnering with them. You're going into court. All right? You're testifying when you want to testify. You're communicating with them. You're making sure that the child, and I'll talk about this all in a little more detail, but at the end of the day, they're the lawyer for the kid, not the lawyer for you. Okay? And so that is the biggest change. But what we now have in Delaware is that every kid in Delaware who's in foster care, yes, who have custody, gets a lawyer. Okay?
Excuse me, the plus and minus of that shift for the CASA?
The plus and minus from the CASA volunteers' perspective.
Please.
So I think the biggest struggle is what you've always known. So what you've always known is that you were the client, not the child. The child wasn't a party to the action. Okay, the child didn't get a lawyer for any case that CASA was involved. Is it semantics a little bit because weren't you all advocating for the child anyway? Absolutely. But you were the client. And so the difference is now you are not. You're an unrepresented, you're still a party to the action, but you're an unrepresented party. And for those of us who have operated, I've been in child welfare for over 20 years, this was something that was hard for me to initially get my head around. But when we looked around the country, and in fact I was just at a meeting a couple weeks ago with the Vice President of Casey Family Programs and the gentleman who chaired the National Commission on Child Fatalities, and he said, I can't remember how it came up, somebody brought up the changes that were happening in Delaware. He was like, the CASAs got lawyers? He's like, I've never heard of that before in my life. And so while it was very familiar to us, it really wasn't national best practice. CASA volunteers are throughout the country. All right, they have done amazing work, but they are appointed as friends of the court to assist the court in making decisions about children. They are typically not a party to the action, and they are not appointed attorneys. The child is appointed an attorney. And so the pluses and minuses, you don't have, technically you're an unrepresented party. At the end of the day, how's that going to shake out? No differently. You and the other adult in the room are going to be working together to make sure that that child's best interests are put before the court.
DFS doesn't do that?
Well, if DFS did that, why would it be us?
Well, that's an indictment.
I mean, DFS is, but I mean, seriously, I mean, if everybody thought that if DFS was representing the best interest of the child, and they did that across the board all the time, why would the child ever need representation of their best interest? Because the system said there needed to be more checks and balances in that system. And so that's why for the last 25, 30 years, there has been a push nationally and locally.
Who asked that question?
The gentleman
I
in
did.
the back.
Afterwards, I want to show you an article from, I also do this in Montana.
Oh, great.
About the people that just retired from the CASA program because of issues with DFS and not the best interest of the children.
So that means we don't sit with the lawyer and
No, you
court,
do.
and we only speak it, as we're called,
No.
protest.
No. So you still sit with the lawyer and the child, if the child's old enough to come to court, just like you do right now.
Okay.
You still prep with the lawyer beforehand. You still share your information. You talk about what's going on. What is the strategy in court? All right? You still testify if you want to testify. You still share whatever you need to share with the court.
So it's really just a change in language.
Correct.
Yeah, I've had a case already after this week, and Bliss was much more forceful in court, and I was happy about it. So,
Good.
yeah, nothing has changed, as far as I could see.
So does that mean we're still getting records
Yes.
for the attorney?
You're getting records, that's a good question. Records for the attorney. So this is a process, a statewide procedure that we're still working on. So our office would always get the records for our volunteer lawyers, the initial DFS records. Okay, there's gonna come a point where we're gonna be able to do that for you too. Okay, so again, there will be a streamlined process of getting records. Now, when we get those records, they will be for you and for the attorney. All right, follow-up records that maybe, if you're getting them, you're sharing with the attorney's getting them, they're sharing with you, the coordinator should be coordinating all of that. So I think it's gonna take a little more off of you by being part of a larger system that already has a procedure in place for obtaining records. And really enable you to focus on what do those records say? What do I need to do on behalf of this child?
I send out a lot of information on my case and I send it to my coordinator. Do I include the attorney with that information?
No, I think you can continue to send that to your coordinator, and your coordinator will share that with the attorney. In the
Okay.
same way, the coordinator is then gonna also coordinate that you and the attorney are speaking, and that you're sharing information, and that you're having a strategy going into court.
The way that you're getting your information will remain the same. How you share it with Lauren and I, you forward it to us, or you call us and say, hey, I have a fax number, can you please fax my order so I can get these medical records or whatever. That process remains the same.
Okay.
Okay?
Are we protected legally?
Yes.
Okay.
You're
That
continuing to
changed
protect
in
it
the law.
Yes.
Okay.
So I think that's a good segue with the 3 ways a child gets represented. Oh, I'm sorry, ma'am.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
You spoke several times about our sharing. I understand that we are, as I see us, we are investigators. And we're gonna have a lot to share. Is the attorney gonna be investigating and sharing that with us? Is there a
Good question.
pro or
So we're
what?
gonna talk about kind of the roles, and this guide, I think, will be very helpful in that. But I think what you can anticipate is the same way you have been doing 90% of the work, you will continue to be doing 90% of the work. But can you pull them in as necessary, a little more than probably you could before? Yes, and we'll talk about that. And certainly when kids go to court, they are gonna have a much more active role in making sure that child is prepared for court. Okay, that won't solely fall on the CASA volunteer. So let me talk about the law in general, and I want to talk to you a little bit about what has changed. So starting on page 30 is how the Oxley Child Advocate Statute looks as of March 5th, which was a Sunday. And I just wanted to kind of highlight for you some of the changes that happened. The most important change is probably that the CASA statute is no longer a standalone statute. It is not in Title 31, Chapter 36. All right, that has been deleted, and instead the CASA statute has been integrated into the Office of the Child Advocate Statute. All right, now, you remember that long list in the CASA statute about all the things that you were supposed to do? All right, that list now was actually the identical list that was in the Office of the Child Advocate statute already, because we were all representing the best interest of children. All right, so now it just applies, it's all in one spot, all right, and I'll show you that when we go through this. But some of the interesting changes is that for the first time, if you see on page 31, we have a definition of a court-appointed special advocate volunteer, all right, and that's, or CASA, and that's how you're referred to throughout the statute. Then if we go to the duties of the child advocate, I want to talk to you a little bit about that. Because I want you to understand, just briefly, that the Office of the Child Advocate is more than just representing the best interest of children. Now we're one legal representation program that we all represent all of the children. All right, but the Office of the Child Advocate does a lot more than that. And I tell you this because you now have ability to impact that in a way you did not before. Okay, because when you were housed within the family court, the leadership of your program was working within a court that had a lot of rules about what they could advocate for and what positions they could take legislatively and at a policy level. Okay, and so I want to tell you a little bit about our duties and how that kind of fits in. So while I talked about legal representation of children, I do very little of that. Back in my day, I did a lot of it, but I do very little direct legal representation of children. And I've talked to you about how the program is set up as to how children get represented, but I don't do much of that day to day. What I do day to day, other than run a state agency, is I oversee a lot of programs, and now the CASA program is included. But the other programs that I oversee is, first of all, I don't quite oversee, I serve as the executive director of something called the Child Protection Accountability Commission. And you will see that within our duties. And our staffs that commission. And what that commission is all the leaders of the child welfare agencies in this state. So the superintendent of the state police, the chief judge of the family court, the secretary of the children's department, the director of DFS, Dr. DeYoung, our child abuse pediatrician expert, the executive director of the Children's Advocacy Center. There's like 23 people on this commission. And they get together 4 times, there are actually one CASA volunteer who serves on that commission as well. But they get together 4 or 5 times a year, and they talk about policy level issues that are impacting children and what we can do better. All right, they watch the caseloads of the DFS workers and go down and advocate. In fact, it was CPAC who got DFS the 27 positions last year to make sure that we could bring their caseloads down to where they need to be. CPAC also reviews every child abuse or neglect death and near death. And so we do a retrospective comprehensive review, and then we make policy recommendations as to what went wrong for these kids and what can we do better. CPAC, together with our Child Death Review Commission, has an annual meeting where they take all those findings that come from those reviews and say, okay, how are we going to fix this system? One of the things that was I'll give you a concrete example of something. There was a breakdown in how we were responding to these child deaths and near deaths, and how the multidisciplinary team, that means the CAC, law enforcement, the Department of Justice, and DFS, how they were all working together or not working together to make sure that we're having good civil and criminal outcomes when something bad happens to one of these children. Led by Corporal Adriano from the Delaware State Police, for the last 3 years, a team has sat together and rewrote the memorandum of understanding between all these agencies, how these cases shake out. And this thing is about ready to get signed off by all the leaders of the agencies. But CPAC was at the helm. CPAC is also the one that puts together the Protecting Delaware's Children Conference every year and a half, that brings together 500 professionals and trains on various child welfare issues. In addition, we also have the Office of the Investigation Coordinator housed within the Office of the Child Advocate. This is a post-Earl Bradley office that was created, and what this office does, and in fact, how many of you know Jen Perry? Treatment worker at DFS? No? One of the best. Anyway, she has just joined our office working for the Office of the Investigation Coordinator. And so what they do is they track every child death, child serious physical injury, and child sexual abuse case in the state. And They analyze the data. First of all, they provide a first response, so if something's not going right, when that case first comes in, they're able to help the MDT team work together to do things right. They also call a lot of data which then tells us where the system breakdowns are, and then again, we're able to advocate for system improvements. They also have taken on the substance exposed infants issue. They're also investigation coordinator as well as CPAC and child death. And so we've got national in-depth technical assistance to try to improve outcomes for substance exposed infants. I tell you all of this stuff because there's a lot of other policy and work that goes on in our office. There's also a ton of legislative work that goes on. Right now, CPAC has 5 bills that, of course, they put me as the executive director. I'm charged with moving these bills through the General Assembly. But I've done a lot of that work for many years. And how does that translate down to what you are doing? Well, it does, because here's what happens. All right, you're in an individual case. You're working on behalf of an individual child, and you're having a struggle, whether it's, you know, the Laurel School District will not allow this child to be enrolled despite the fact that this is their school of origin. Or maybe it's that DFS, it's been 30 days and this child's still not in outpatient counseling. Maybe, you know, they're overutilizing psychotropic medications for your teenage clients. And you see this stuff on an individual case. And you're going and you're advocating strongly on behalf of that child on that individual case, on that individual issue. But what happens is your coordinators are calling that individual issues, and it's bubbling up. And we're comparing it to the cases about those volunteer attorneys that might be calling in and having the same issues. And then we're comparing it to the deputy child advocates in our office who may also be having that same issue. And then guess what? We're trying to do something at a policy level. So you keep advocating on an individual, but you're telling us where the breakdowns in the system are, that then we're able to use that at a policy level to make legislative or policy change to improve things for kids. So to me, what was always missing was that partnership, because we only knew half the story on the kids. All right, now we know the story on all of the kids by us being one big team. And to me, that is critically important.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Can we now, through your office, get involved in mediation?
Mediation how?
Well-
Mediation in what types of cases?
Well, I come
Because
from
typically our cases
Indiana.
don't go to mediation.
Well, I come from Indiana and we were allowed to mediate, say, in a divorce situation or what have you.
So is your question, are we now allowed to get involved in mediation, or are we now allowed to pick up cases outside of cases where kids are in foster care?
Yes, both.
Okay, so mediation in Delaware typically does not happen in any cases that we get involved in.
Okay.
So I would think that we would continue to not be involved simply because the cases we're involved in bypass mediation. In terms of cases that are not DFS CASA, at this point we are not going to be having CASA pick up those cases. But I can't promise you, I mean, there are endless opportunities here. Endless opportunities to expand the CASA program and to continue to partner CASAs with child attorneys in all kinds of ways. We're not there yet. We're still like trying to, you know, get our access to our state vehicles, you know, and stop living like sardines. But I can tell you, you know, 6 months, a year from now, there could be great things that are coming. There was a question about, so that just gives you, there's a lot of other things that our office does, but that just gives you a broad brush of things that might impact, that you may be able to impact in OCA. There was a question about confidentiality and immunity and things of that nature, and you can see in 9006A that you are now protected under the OCA statute in the same way you were protected.
What page number is that?
I'm sorry, page 33. At the bottom it starts. So all of our records are confidential. Anyone participating in our office, all of them, our stuff is protected. And then I'm going to show you the immunity one. Hold on. It is 9008 to the bottom, starts at the bottom of page 37. And specifically says, no attorney, director, investigation, social worker, other person employed, contracted, or volunteering for OCA shall be subject to suit. All right, so that's where you are. And I think you will appreciate as you look at this that, you know, we really did integrate, so we have one approach. No matter how we're representing the child, the same rules apply to everyone. One I would also point out to you, so if we're going, the meat of the legislation really starts on page 34, and it's the legal representation of children piece. There's some exciting things in here for me from a procedural aspect, and it really allows us to do so, or takes what we were doing by practice and put in statute. But the things that I would point out to you is that these duties and rights that start at the bottom of page 35 and go all of page 36 are the duties and rights you have always had, and the duties and rights that OCA has always had. We're just all together now. All right, the one thing that did change a little bit in this, and let me find exactly where it is. It's on page 35, it's right above C, it's actually B4, and it says that when we give them our court orders, that basically we can get records if the court allows us on the guardian or petitioners as well. So you know how sometimes when the kids come into care and the petition is against not just mom and dad, but grandma who had guardianship before. We couldn't get records on grandma. All right, our court order allowed us to get records on the parents. This now allows the court, us to ask the court to write in to get records on grandma as well. Or say Uncle Bob, during the course of the proceedings, files for guardianship of the child. We would ask the court to amend the order to allow us to get records on Uncle Bob. So having that in statute is very helpful. Trying to see. Oh, there's the other neat thing is that the attorneys are appointed, and they're allowed to request any appropriate relief from the court on behalf of a child. This can include filing for expungements. So I know that some of the attorneys before were comfortable in filing for expungements on behalf of the kids, and some were not, but this will now allow them to do so. In addition, our office gets a data dump from the public defender's office on a regular basis that tells us every child who has incurred new charges. And now all the children who are part of the CASA program will also have that screening, and it will allow you to be promptly alerted that the child has been arrested. It will allow you and the child's attorney to kind of work together to watch that process, to make sure that someone is advocating. That will primarily be on the child's attorney to make sure they get a public defender, but certainly you nagging the child's attorney to the extent that's a problem, will help move this along. And then at the back end, making sure we regularly screen all of our kids to see whether or not they're eligible for expungements, and we're promptly filing for those expungements when they are. And so we know that these children having a criminal record, a juvenile record or whatever, that when it really adversely impacts their ability to get housing, education, employment as they transition to adulthood. So this we found to be a very important piece of the work that we do, and we're hoping to expand that. Yes, sir?
What stage is that done in? The final stages? Or?
So when they first get arrested, we get a data dump, and so you would get alerted. You will, and again, give us, time to get our state cars and all this other stuff we never thought about in order. But there will be a point where your coordinators are going to be sending you an email saying, "Hey, your client, the child just got arrested. Here's the information," and we attach a bunch of things, and it will go to you and the child's attorney, I would imagine, and making sure they get a public defender, etc. Then when the charges are resolved, there'll be another screening that will occur to decide whether they're immediately eligible for an expungement or whether a certain period of time needs to lapse before they could be eligible. If a certain period of time, then we basically tickle it for that period of time and come back, make sure they haven't gotten any new charges, and then push for an expungement at that
So
point.
you're doing it at every incident rather than waiting to the end?
We're what?
You're doing it at every time the person's arrested rather than
Yes.
waiting to the end of the process? Or?
We are doing it every time they're arrested. We're alerting you that they're arrested.
Right. I get
And
you.
then when it's concluded, we're screening it to see whether it's expungible or not. Because if that charge is dropped, if it's a misdemeanor charge and it's dropped, they're immediately eligible for an expungement. And in fact, the court can do the expungement right there at the day of the criminal hearing where the charge was dropped.
Are we expected to go with them now?
I think it's a case-by-case basis. And I would encourage you to work with your coordinator about who best it is to be there to help support through the delinquency process. When we train our attorneys, we tell them that the child's public defender, but their job is in advocating for the best interest of the child to make sure that they get a public defender and make sure that public defender is doing what they need to do on behalf of a child. Isn't that like at least 50% of your work? You're not doing it yourself, but you're making sure the people who are supposed to be helping the child are doing what they need to do. You're a facilitator, an agitator, whatever you want to call it, but you're helping to empower the other adults who are supposed to be doing what they need to do on behalf of a kid, and I think the juvenile delinquency is no different. So those are some of the changes that have happened in the statute. The only other thing I would point out is on page 38. You can see that there was a section we added to the end of the OCA statute on the CASA program, and that doesn't really impact you, instead it impacts the staff. All right, and it was just making sure that we were preserving what the coordinators and the program director are doing, making sure that the positions were transferred over appropriately to OCA, and also finally giving Gwen an official statutory title of CASA program director, which has been a long time coming. So anyway, I think those are the highlights of the statute. What I'd like to do next.
Before we go on, may I ask a question?
Yeah.
On page 9, it delineates the roles and responsibilities of CASA volunteer. And in Appendix B, there is a schematic which says the CASA volunteer duties. Is this Appendix B entered into the legislation? Because they don't seem to reconcile with the delineated duties on pages 9 and 10.
So Appendix B, this is our one-page kind of cheat sheet. All right, this is an overall, and I was going to talk about this next. So if you're thinking about the overall concept, all right, is that this is a triad of advocacy. All right, there is the CASA coordinator, the child's attorney, and the CASA volunteer. While you each have unique duties, and I think that went to a question earlier, a lot of these duties also overlap. All right, so what we tried to do is come up with a one-page schematic that really kind of said, all right, here are the things that each part of the triad is primarily responsible for.
Is this a part of the legislation, Appendix B?
Appendix B is not a part of the legislation, okay? The legislation
so it's not part of the legislation.
No,
Gotcha.
this is kind of what we are training on, all right, that says, okay, here are the things we think that you should be doing. These are the things that you typically do. I mean, we certainly would not have, actually, some of these things actually are in the legislation. Direct, regular contact with the child client. I mean, that is in the legislation.
Right.
You know, reviewing records regarding the child and family, it doesn't really say that. It says, I don't know, investigate the case.
But the legislation does not define the triad, is that correct?
It doesn't call it a triad, absolutely not. Okay, so it says a child's attorney is appointed and a CASA volunteer is appointed.
Correct.
And it says that a coordinator oversees the CASA volunteer. All right, but it does not describe it as a triad. No, this is, so legislation's broad, and then this is kind of our nuts and bolts. Here's how it is implemented in real life.
So this is a separate piece.
This is explaining at a practical level what the legislation does.
Okay.
And it may be organic, I mean, it may change a little bit.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, this is our best estimate of kind of what this is gonna look like, but certainly you guys, boots on the ground, working this, you know, we'll be back 6 to 9 months, a year from now, on the triad and the guides, tweaking as we feel necessary as we learn things. All right, we do not have, I will tell you at the outset, we do not have all the answers. Some of this is, we gotta try this out and see how it works. I mean, we've looked at national best practices, we've looked at how other states have implemented their programs, and we've put together what we think is a workable path forward. So, I'm glad the gentleman in the back pointed out this one-page flyer, because this is kind of what we have shared with the various stakeholders, the Department of Justice, the judges, DFS, to kind of say, this is kind of the overall, what this looks like beyond the legislation. One thing, so let me next, I don't want to talk about that, I want to go All right, so let's go through some of the roles and responsibilities. So, as the gentleman in the back pointed out, there is a section in your current book that talks about roles and responsibilities, and they start on page 9. And we talk about the CASA volunteer, we talk about the child's attorney, and we talk about the coordinator. I think as you read this, I would encourage you not to get too far down in the weeds on it, but it's really business as usual. All right, how we envision this, each one of the child attorneys are going to have, well, for your child attorneys, about 65 to 70 children that they are responsible for. All right, there is no way that, as you asked, they can go out and do everything, nor do we want them. The way this system works best, as we've learned nationally, is where the CASA volunteer is doing most of the legwork. You are having most of the direct client contact. You are going to those IEP meetings. You are going to meetings at DFS. You are advocating for that child in the same way you have been. But are those duties, but say the IEP meeting, and look, because you asked that question earlier, but say you're at an IEP meeting and you feel like you need somebody with an Esquire at the end of their name, all right? That will be helpful in moving forward what needs to happen for this child at this particular meeting at the school. Get the child, tell your coordinator, we need the child attorney here, and get them there to be a partner at the table to help you.
Are a parent surrogate?
Excuse me?
Are a parent surrogate?
Well, I mean, you certainly, the educational surrogate parent has to be at those meetings. But sometimes you also serve as the ESPs, right?
Yep. I'm doing a training next month.
Is it possible that the child's attorney could serve as the ESP? Say you don't want to do that. There's not but maybe the child's attorney wants to do it. That's a possibility as well, if they get the proper training. Does that answer your question?
I think. I'll let you know.
With the roles and responsibilities, I'm not going to go over in detail because I think you're basically doing what you've done before. You're relying on your coordinators the same way. Your coordinators are going to be that connection for you. They're going to be the support. They're going to be giving you the guide. We look at the CASA coordinators as the experts here, all right? And they're providing you with the support and the attorney with the support and information, all right? But you're out doing most of the work. Now let's talk about child contact, though, because this is a place where there's a little more change. So we expect, again, with these attorneys having 65 to 70 children each, that you, again, are going to be the person having the direct child contact. You are going to be going and observing this child in a variety of settings and watching them interact with people that are important to them in their lives. You're going to be getting to know that child. All right, but there may be times where we need that child attorney to also get to know that child. We envision that as primarily going to be with the teens. All right? And we envision that as primarily going to be when they want to participate in court. Now, within your packets, and I'm sure because Lauren helped with our office. In fact, Lauren and another one of my deputies went to National CASA last year and provided a workshop on youth involvement in court. So Lauren has been a leader on this issue together with one of my deputies. But we have a number of documents. There's an hour training online that you can watch that talks about how to involve youth in court. We have put in the appendix here a number of documents starting with page 43. This thing's cool, by the way. This is how to talk to your kids about who all of you are. We stole this from North Carolina. We have given appropriate credit to North Carolina, but I just thought this thing was so cool we had to take it. But then starting with the youth's rights on page 45, how to explain the rights on page 47. Again, we have a whole separate training on this, but starting on page 50, the guide for helping youth participate in court. Then there's a questionnaire right after that. This is lots of good stuff. All right, and your own Sussex coordinator helped to write all this stuff. All right, and like I said, there's a training online. But the reason I bring this up because youth involvement in court is really important. The court has made this a priority. CPAC had made this a priority for the Permanency for Adolescence Committee just recently dissolved. Nationally, it's important. These children have a right to be involved in the court proceedings about them and their family. And the work that we have done on that has given you a lot of structure as to how to make sure that these kids can meaningfully contribute to the court proceedings.
Can I ask a question in terms of age? What age are the children allowed to participate?
Good question. Sometimes you gotta go with your gut. I would say 14 above definitely, but the court doesn't have a minimum age. Now, I will tell you that there are a lot of jurisdictions around the country that are dragging the babies in. All right? I still haven't gotten there. Maybe someday before I retire, I will get there. I'm not there. All right, but at the point that a child understands what's happening in court and wants to be a part of the proceeding after being appropriately supported by the adults that they rely on in their lives, like you, there's no real age. We just had a case, and these 3 girls, 9 and 11-year-old twins, and they wanted to come to their permanency hearing. Well, it's a Sussex case. No, one set of twins. Twins, so 11-year-old twins and a 9-year-old. And they wanted to come to their permanency hearing. Well, I don't know how much you guys know about what happens in the other jurisdictions in this state, and we're trying to get leading practices to try to get us all on the same playing field, but a Sussex permanency hearing takes 4 hours, a Kent permanency hearing takes about 30 minutes, all right, and a Newcastle permanency hearing takes about an hour to an hour and a half. All right, these girls, Sussex County, want to come to their permanency hearing. 4 hours later, they've had enough of court, okay? Next time, the attorney asks them, do you want to come to court? They're like, no, thanks, just let us know. But helping to meaningfully engage them and involve them, but this is something that you can't do alone. All right, so if you have a child who wants to be involved in the court process, wants to understand their rights while they're in care, you need that child attorney. And sometimes it might be a 16-year-old, and sometimes it might be a 9-year-old. And you're just going to have to use your common sense and good judgment together with the support of your coordinator to figure that out. Your first person to approach is always your coordinator. All right? They are your lifeline. They are your experts. Talk this through with them, and they will get on the phone and talk to Jen or Bliss. Here's what's even better. Before they get on the phone with Jen and Bliss, they're going to get up out of their desk, they're going to walk about 15 feet, and they're going to have 2 other attorneys they can go talk to, maybe 4, depending on the day. So they've got a whole cadre of expertise that's available to them that, again, wasn't before.
So the child is apprised of his or her responsibility or availability to participate in permanency hearings. Is that correct?
Every hearing, not just a permanency. I use that as an example, yeah. But you should be having a meaningful conversation with the child about how they can be involved in court. And that guide and questionnaire, I think, is really helpful. If it's not, we would appreciate feedback. I think Lauren and Eliza worked very fastidiously on that for many years. And I think it's a good piece to just give you the questions to kind of ask and tell them why it's important. But having the judge see them and know them and talk to them, it's pretty important. And I think, you know, I mean, Judge Jones is he's been a statewide leader on this issue.
I think that, because we did this in Indiana 10 years ago, but
we're a little behind.
One of the things I found with my kids when I brought them to court is just setting up what the courtroom looks like and who sits where and who
Critical.
might ask questions. And I actually I have a very, very, very young 15-year-old, and he came to court because he wanted to, and we went through all of this, and poor little guy heard some things he didn't want to hear, and the judge stopped the court, and we took him out. But it was tough on him.
Yeah. And sometimes it is, and I think that the guide and the questionnaire really gives you some good tools as to how to overcome some of those barriers, to give the children options. You know, say they are sitting in the hearing and they know that this next witness is going to just trash them for the next 20 minutes and they don't want to sit there and hear it. You know, to be able to say to their attorney and to you, I can't handle this, can I go sit outside while they're talking? And so I think the guide and the questionnaire are very helpful in that regard and supporting. But you can't, the message on the youth involvement in court, you cannot and should not do that alone. That is not your pail of water to carry by yourself. The child's attorney should be hand in hand with you, with your coordinator, helping that child to make the best decisions of how they want to be involved in court. But other than that, I mean, I think you're gonna continue to do the work that you're doing, supported by your coordinators, sharing information with the attorneys, having those conferences before you go to court, submitting your summaries that the coordinator and the attorney can utilize for the purpose of preparing for court, talking about what witnesses need to be subpoenaed. I would expect that the attorneys, and I think that your attorneys for the most part already do this, but if you're calling somebody to testify, they're talking to that person before to make sure they're prepared to testify. And that should be happening. So if you want to think, like, you're the boots on the ground, but empower the attorneys to do their legal stuff. All right, and I think you have pretty decent attorneys down here. I think we now have pretty decent attorneys statewide, and we're gonna work hard to make sure that we're continuing to support them. And here's something else about your attorneys I want you to know. So they're contract attorneys, but we are treating them as part of our staff, so to speak. All right, so like we have an attorney-only retreat once a year. And all those attorneys will be there with the full-time OCA attorneys. All right, so there's this sharing of information and training and ideas, even just the email exchanges. Like we had a case last week in Kent County where a bunch of the kids at Murphy, I don't know if you've heard this yet, but they've decided that they want to be emancipated. Well, we don't have emancipation in Delaware. But one of the attorneys was now able to send an email to the other attorneys in the office, full-time as well as the other contract attorneys, and say, hey, what do you know about emancipation? Because this attorney didn't know whether or not we had a law. And instead of them spending 3 hours researching it, why don't you just ask the other people you work with? And so now we're all connected in a way that we didn't have the benefit of their expertise, they didn't have the benefit of our expertise before. And so you should benefit, and the kids, most importantly, should benefit from us all sharing information. And just so we're clear, we have no emancipation in the state of Delaware. You must be 18. No matter how mature you are.
Why not?
Why not?
Yeah.
We just never have. We never have. And it'll be interesting.
Has it ever been discussed?
It has been, and I'm digging back in my memory now as to there was a lot of research done on it at one point, and came out that it was a huge con, because if children's brains aren't fully developed by 25, why are we decreasing it to, allowing them to be emancipated at 16. If anything, maybe we should be moving 18 to 21. I mean, there's better outcomes for kids that are in, foster care if they're able to stay connected to the system to age 21. So why would we disconnect them at age 16? But having said that, I haven't looked at the issue in a long, and I'm curious because it is coming. Like, I think Murphy School, there's what, like 8 kids there. If they're all talking to whether or not YAC will pick this up. The Youth Advisory Council might pick this up as something they want to explore. It'd be interesting to hear the dialogue. Because the kids, helped us do all this youth involvement in court stuff as well. That they wanted to be heard. So they have a voice.
Well, I have a case where I have a 17-year-old. She would like to be emancipated. And we're working on reunification. Which doesn't make sense to me.
It's Plan B.
Yeah. And if the court would say, you gotta go home with your mother, she'll run away. I mean, she already said, I will not live with that woman.
Right.
Now, some of the rules, I think it should be on a case-by-case situation. She is mature enough to, and her foster mother, who she loves dearly, would keep her. She wants to keep her. So
Will she get guardianship of her? I think emancipation means that at 16 or 17, you're an adult, and you don't need any of us. So you don't get the supports of the system anymore, you don't get the judge, you don't get the CASA, nothing. You're an adult, boom. So, to me, just because she doesn't want to go home to mom, doesn't mean she doesn't need the rest of the adults in her life supporting her.
yeah, well, she does. There's no doubt about that. But we have to have a better solution.
I agree, and I would encourage foster mom to become guardian.
Yeah.
Because
That's an
that
idea.
would get her out of the foster care system while still being with the person who loves her and takes care of her.
Yeah.
So, all right, let me see, what's next here?
Yeah.
So let me hit on one of the issues that we have talked about and is on that one-page cheat sheet. The triad cheat sheet is about conflicts. All right, so let's talk about conflicts for a little bit. And again, we have assumed the worst. When we asked North Carolina and adopted North Carolina's process on how they handle conflicts between the child's attorney and the CASA volunteer, they said, well, here's our policy, but we don't have to use it. Okay? So this is going to be a work in progress, but we have taken North Carolina's policy. And basically what the policy is that if what you think is in the best interest of the child and what the child's attorney thinks is in the best interest conflict, we're going to work it out within OCA. We're not taking that dirty laundry to the court. Okay? And how North Carolina, in theory, because again, they tell us they've never used this, say it shakes out that if the CASA volunteer, basically the CASA volunteer wins on factual issues, the child's attorney wins on legal issues. So, factual issue, you're talking to the therapist, this child is upset every time they have visits with their parents. The therapist says the visits should be decreased. The child's attorney says, I don't want to go into court and say that. I know this judge is blah, blah, blah. It's a factual issue. CASA volunteer wins. We're going to file something on behalf of the child that decreases visitation. CASA volunteer says, this mom's terrible. This child's been in care for 2 months. This mother's terrible. She's a heroin addict. She's never going to get her life together. Dad's unknown. I want to terminate parental rights. Child's attorney says, I hear you. We have no legal grounds. Child's attorney wins. So those are just two kind of easy examples of legal versus factual. This is going to be a work in progress. What we have said that if those differences occur, then first the coordinator will try to resolve them. 95% of differences in having worked in this world for 20 years, I find is because people aren't operating on the same set of facts. So, you know this, based on what each of you know, you're probably both right. But if we actually get to what the facts are, then you're probably going to agree. What the actual facts are, then you're probably going to agree. So we look at the coordinators to be the first level of trying to resolve any potential conflicts. And then if they're unable, then they're going to kick it up to Gwen and myself to resolve. We are hopeful that we will be like North Carolina and not have these issues, but we have to always plan for the worst. And of course, whenever any changes, and everyone imagines the 25 ways the sky could fall, we have to have the plans for, if something, if there were to be a conflict, how we would resolve it. Let's talk a little bit about and this is also in your guide, but your relationship with other parties and with the other legal counsel. So currently, your attorney deals with the other lawyers, right? And you deal with the DFS workers directly. Right? I think that will continue to operate the same way. All right, and if you have any doubt, you talk to your coordinators. Now, if one of the lawyers wants to talk to you, I know typically you've been told don't talk to them. I think that, from the CASA program perspective, that's probably still a good idea. I would talk to your coordinator, but there may be times when you do want to talk to them, and you do have a right to talk to them if you want. Okay? But just realize that, I feel like I'm in a, police station, but anything you say can, may be used against you. Right. So just proceed cautiously with respect to that. So I think in general, your relationship and how you work with the parents directly, with the DFS worker directly will not change. The lawyers will continue to communicate. What we have asked DFS, and this again will be a work in progress, while ideally they should be doing this, they don't always, which is why we have this multi-part system, so hopefully nothing falls through the cracks because all of us are kind of doing the same job most of the time. But they are supposed to tell you when there's any change in placement. And I know, that my experience to date is this is a continual struggle that sometimes you don't learn about it till after the child's been moved. That is not ideal because you probably could have helped in at least a third of the cases prevent that from happening. But that DFS communicate to you and the coordinator and the child's attorney at the same time. All right, so that notice is going to all three of you at once. It may be that it goes to your coordinator and down to you, but that we are trying to get that communication to happen. When the attorneys are communicating, the coordinator will be sharing that information with you as they currently do. So I think on a practical level, in terms of communication between the various people, that's not going to change. If there are opportunities for improvement in that, I would encourage you to share that with your coordinator as we're looking to streamline best practices statewide. Your feedback will be very helpful to us. All right, I think there was a question and I answered it somewhat, but kind of how does this look, the same or different inside the courtroom? And I think Tina asked this earlier, but you're still gonna sit in the same spot. You're still gonna basically have nowhere to sit in Sussex County until we get a new courthouse built. And believe it or not, you know, the curtain in front of the table in Judge Ryan's courtroom is much better than sitting on the hard benches in Kent County. For any of you, I don't know, does anybody volunteer also in Kent? No, not today, okay. I know there are a number of Sussex volunteers that also volunteer in Kent. Again, we're grateful. But it's not an ideal setup, but you and the child's attorney should all be sitting together. All right, if the child is not there, you and the child's attorney should be sitting together. You are a team. All right, the information you are sharing back and forth in the courtroom should be occurring. We had a question recently, because the CASA is still a party, does the court have an independent obligation to ask you if you want to testify? Each judge is going to handle this a little bit differently, yes. But my expectation is that you and that child's attorney will have already had that conversation before you go in the courtroom. And you will have made a decision, like you have up until today, about whether or not you need to testify, or you may say, I don't think so, but let's hear what blah, blah, blah has to say, because that may change my mind. I may need to get up and clarify 2 or 3 things. Okay, great. You guys have a game plan walking in there. All right? Even if nobody calls you, you still have a right to testify if you want to testify. But again, best practice should be that everybody's working together to figure that out. The order you go in the courtroom in terms of the questions will continue to be the same. Could you get up and ask questions because you're a party? Yeah. Ideally, do we want that? No. I mean, but we can't say you can't do that. But if you tell me that you want the child's attorney to ask these questions and they're not getting at this issue, we've got a problem there, because they really should be covering that. Again, you guys, in the way you have been, should have a game plan going in. Here are the things we need to get out, and make sure they're getting out in the court. Again, we are going to, hopefully, by all these attorneys talking together on a regular basis and trying to institute statewide best practices, I'm hoping, even though I think that you have very good attorneys, that you're going to see some further improvement in kind of the questions they're asking, what they're pushing. We are also requiring the attorneys, and I didn't realize this wasn't happening because it's happening in the other 2 counties, but apparently your attorneys never went to the PPHs. And so they were unaware that that happens in the other counties, but they will be there. They will be asking the basic questions that they should be asking at the PPHs.
What is that?
The first hearing, the preliminary protective, so the first hearing after the child comes into care. Sometimes you guys are there, sometimes you're not. Maybe your coordinator is still working on, or you say, yeah, I'll pick up that case, but I can't be at that hearing on Thursday with Judge Jones, but the attorneys will be there.
You reuse the acronyms, I just didn't know.
I apologize for that, I know. It's like we speak in code.
I'm hearing you say that you have to have the game plan with your attorneys. That's not currently happening, or has not been happening with me.
Okay,
I sort of go in there blindly.
well, that's not good.
Okay,
And so that, I think that is a best practice that we want to,
okay, so I need to ask. That's
yes,
what I want.
yeah, what's our game
To have a
plan walking
meeting
in,
with
right,
you.
right. Or at least telephone.
Uh-huh.
But there should be some conversation occurring before you go into the courtroom that says, this is the point of this hearing today, here's what we need to get out, here are the 3 things that I think that the court needs to know. Now, you can't have a list of 504 things that the court needs to know, because the hearings in Sussex County are way too long already, all right? We need to kind of condense them a bit. Did you have a question, ma'am?
Yeah, what about when DFS and worker and the CASA attorney decide that they want to go in and talk with the judge before the actual hearing?
So the DFS worker and the CASA attorney,
Yes.
that's weird.
That there's like some confidential physical information to share with the judge.
That's
I
weird.
guess that they didn't want to share in front of the child, but shouldn't the CASA be a part of that?
Yeah, and I'm not clear as to how or why that would occur. I could see where all the attorneys go in to have an office conference with the judge, and that would be okay.
Maybe it was the attorney.
Yeah, if it's the attorney, that's different.
It was the first time I went to court, so.
Yeah, so what happens sometimes is there is a legal issue, and the judge says, I want to talk about this legal issue outside of the party's presence.
This was really about a sexual activity and those kind of abuse issues. And I wasn't invited to be a part of that. I didn't know to ask. I didn't know, is this a normal thing that happens?
I don't think it's normal, but I'm sure at times that, conferences with just the attorneys do occur. I've participated in some of those. Like I said, it's typically a legal issue, but it might just be a very sensitive issue that maybe they just wanted to make the judge aware of, but,
I guess the reason I asked that question is because now that the CASA is not my attorney, well, I was thinking, well,
they should still come back and tell you what just happened.
I didn't have a need to be in there. The
Right.
attorney was representing the
You,
work that
right.
I've done. So now that they're not. if
But they
they're-
still know what you've done. You're still a partner. You're still working in conjunction with them. And when they walk out, I would anticipate they're gonna come and say, here is just what we went over. So even though they're not your lawyer, they should still be briefing you on
Rather
something
than,
that happens.
than a CASA being a part of that information sharing.
Right. So even under the old circumstances, you still wouldn't be a part of that because it appears to me, and again, I'm going on your facts, that it was an attorney conference where the judge says, I want to speak to the attorneys in the case. And the judge has the authority to do that. Sometimes the judge will come back and put on the record that which, they spoke about, but sometimes he just wants, he or she just wants to talk to the lawyers.
And not have it on the record.
Yeah.
I have a question about the process, the new process.
Yes.
I'm still unclear as to, you're saying that the child attorney takes care of, what am I trying to say? The things that I normally do and how I got my case is I get it from my coordinator.
Good.
She tells me who the attorney is and sends all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I heard you say that the child has the attorney and they will be doing the same thing that I would be doing, like following up if I have to go to doctor's appointment or.
No, they will not. You will still be doing
Yeah,
that.
I'm unclear as to.
No, you will still be doing that which you have been doing, okay? The attorney, because of their caseload, and frankly, you both don't need to be out there asking, to follow up on the doctor's appointment issue, okay?
Okay, well, not necessarily everything that goes along with that child. I'm unclear as to the child's attorney. What is their responsibility and what does it have, and how does that, their responsibility and my responsibility to do the legwork, as you say. I'm unclear because it seems like we're doing duplicate work.
You're not, because you are going to be doing 90% of the work, and the attorney will be taking in the same way that it happens right now, and the attorney will be taking that work and that information and helping to put a case together to go before the judge to put evidence in so the court can make a decision as to what's in the best interest of that child. The only time where I said there might be some duplicative, I gave a couple examples. One of them was you're in a meeting at the schools and you need somebody with an esquire to move whatever needs to happen on behalf of this child, all right? You need a lawyer, okay? And so work with your coordinator, and I know sometimes the coordinators go to those meetings with you as well, but if you think the lawyer needs to be there, then let's get the lawyer in. Another example I gave is if you have an older child and they want to be involved in court, then there is going to be some duplicative work because the child's attorney needs to prep that child for court, needs to have a conversation with that child as to how they're going to participate in court, needs to debrief that child after court. And there's a whole separate 1-hour training on youth involvement in court that can really help with that piece, but the child's attorney, that's a place where I can see they need to do a little more work.
Okay, in terms of boundaries, now, if that happens, what you just said, whose responsibility is it to get that kid to court, or get that kid to
Oh,
the
good, I'm
attorney?
glad you asked that. See, I really gave her a little tip to ask about that, about getting the child to court. So the rule of the CASA program has been and will continue to be that you cannot personally transport children. Okay? However, now that the CASA program is part of the Office of the Child Advocate, we have state cars, and we have state employees who are your CASA coordinators, your lifelines. And so typically how we handle this is that we always ask DFS, the child wants to be involved in court, can you make arrangements for transportation? That's what you've done up to that point, that's what we do as well. Sometimes DFS will say, no, 3 people called out sick, the FSA can't do it, I forgot to put a request in, whatever it is, they're not able to help out. At this point, I mean, up until this point, you've been like, I don't know what to tell you, you tell the court you couldn't bring the child. But now there's actually a backup plan, and you can reach out to the coordinators and see whether or not, what we normally do is we negotiate. You take them, we'll bring them back home, or something of that nature. And so the coordinator could transport the child, and you, frankly, if you want to go along for that ride, to court. And the reason I suggest going along for the ride is if you know anything about kids. I mean, the places where they talk most to you is when they're sitting in the back seat of a car or they don't want to go to sleep. Okay, so it's an opportunity if you have the time. Yeah, you can have your monthly client contact. Would that count if you were doing the transport?
Yep.
So you could have your monthly client contact, and the child could get a ride to court, and the coordinator gets to spend some time with the child as well. So while we can't give you everything and say, yes, now you can go transporting kids, because we're trying to really protect you and save you from yourself and the kindness and the goodness that you want to provide to each one of these kids. And so this is kind of the halfway point that we can provide, in that sometimes we can help with transportation. I'd like to talk a little bit about other gifts. I heard you talking about the money that you have available for camps and things of that nature, and I wanted to tell you a little bit about what OCA has as well, because we're all one big happy family now. All right, and so we get donations to our office. I know another struggle that you have is that other than little incidentals here and there, you're really not allowed to purchase anything for the children. And again, trying to save you from yourself, because you're obviously good, caring human beings, and that's why you're CASA volunteers to begin with, and you want to make a lot difference in the life, and so we need to put boundaries in so that you don't, you know, lose yourself in this process, and you're still excellent volunteers. Right, or go bankrupt. But we have a donations line. All right, and so we have money that we're able to provide prom gowns, we're able to provide graduation cards, we are able to provide camps, we are able to provide intern opportunities for kids as they need them, and we do this, all right? And so we're all part of it, and so the children who are involved with the CASA program will also have availability. In the same way that Juan talked about the Friends of Sussex CASA, is that right? Am I saying it? Okay. Have those monies. And so I can envision, say, camp costs $500, you get $100 from Friends of Sussex CASA, and maybe we give the other $400, or we give $300, we gotta get $100 from DFS, from the 20th Century Fund. So anyway, your coordinators will help you with those kind of things. We've also gotten laptops for kids that are going off to college. So we have those funds. I don't know if any of you know, but one of our family court judges passed away about 1.5 years ago in Newcastle County, and we got a ton of donations in his memory. He was a very big supporter of OCA, and so we've gotten a ton of donations, and that has really helped with our donations fund as well. In addition,
What about the babies? I hear you talking about the older kids. You got 0 to 9, I would say, or to 10 or 11. Those kids need things too.
They do.
Do you, I mean.
Absolutely.
And you talk about bringing them back and forth to court. I have babies, so what you're saying to me sounds good, but I have an infant and then I have a 6-year-old. And they are not, they're not able to articulate what they need or what they want. Now, where they are, those parents have given them everything, but there comes a time where they may need something else because they have other children.
And then I think you talk to your coordinator, and we have a conversation, but we have provided for young kids as well. And whether it's that little Susie who's 2.5, dreams that she's a ballerina and she wants to go take a dance class, and perhaps we're either paying for the dance class or we're paying for the outfit that she needs to go take the dance class. Perhaps a child is, doesn't qualify for Social Security disability, the infant, but needs, perhaps this special walker or whatever that's gonna help them develop. Yes, we have absolutely paid for those things as well. And you're right, I use the examples of the older kids because they usually, number one, and are more often in families where the families can't provide for what they need. Their needs are more expensive. Their real life experiences are getting less and less, whereas some of the little kids do really end up in families that give these children everything they could possibly hope for.
At a detriment to.
Yes,
some
well,
other things, so.
there's that, but I want you to know that we have that. In addition, we were talking in one of the in-service, so, perhaps Susie's birthday is coming up and you're not allowed to go buy her, birthday presents, but she very much wants these new pair of sneakers. You could ask whether or not our office could purchase those sneakers. And then if you really wanted to purchase them but couldn't, our office would purchase them, but you could also make a donation back to the donation line, kind of replenishing the donations account, and that is tax deductible. So there are opportunities here. We want to make sure these kids get what they need. We also now will have a streamlined approach at Christmas. I don't know whether or not during the holidays last year, any of you took advantage of the Christiana Rotary Club, but they are wonderful and really provide, Uggs, iPods, you name it. And we worked long and hard with them to, number one, not call our children orphans. That was a long process. But also to tell them that they really want, when they say they want Uggs, they don't want the knockoff brand. They really want the Uggs. And to appreciate the fact that they are kids that are growing up in an environment and, want to have what the other children have, and occasionally, at Christmas, the holidays, perhaps we should give that. We're also working with them with the Back to School project, and there's continued opportunities for us. We also just got another donation to our office to help with, real life experiences for our kids. So please work with your coordinators. We do have a process in our office, and we will help to the extent that we can make sure they have these experiences. All right, what else? What have I not covered? Any burning questions that I haven't talked about today? Missy, can you think of anything else you want me to cover?
I don't think so.
Yes.
I think it might be more of a local thing that maybe Missy could answer. In the switch over cases that are going from Jen to Bliss and vice versa, are they taking any extra step in meeting with the CASA to
So
get caught up?
So I just
Our
emailed,
lone CASA coordinator in Sussex right now.
I just emailed both Bliss and Jen, and I merged our calendars together. I said block off time so I could reach out to you guys, set up times with you to have a teleconference or a sit down face to face. So within the probably next week, you'll be getting an email from me saying, hey, on this day, can you do a half hour just to...
That's wonderful.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think what we've done so far statewide is try to prioritize as these, because we had new contract attorneys actually coming in Newcastle County. So prioritize, all right, here are the cases coming up on the calendar the next 4 weeks. Let's get up to speed on those. If you've got a hearing that's out 2 months, then you're in the pipeline, but the coordinators probably have not gotten to you yet. The coordinators?
No, the old court orders.
Yep.
Will they change?
Yeah, I'm in the process, they're trickling in, so as soon as I get them, I'm forwarding them to you guys. Yeah, and a lot of people have not yet, so they're just starting to come through.
But your court order, as I said at the beginning, will now have the attorney and you on the same court order. So there won't be 2 separate orders anymore,
Okay,
which is nice too.
I understood that, but I didn't know whether or not it would be retroactive.
Yeah, what we had to do because again, they're now representing the child, we had to do substitutions of counsels and new court orders on every CASA case. So 370 of them, the court was real happy. No, we got it. We had a great, efficient process, I think.
To access the online youth in court,
I'll have Missy send that
I
out.
can send it to you.
Yeah, it's on and you get CASA and service hours for doing that as well.
I must have missed that training session.
What was that again?
The youth involvement in court online
The
training.
online training
I'm sure we have a
that we
session.
on their
There's a
website.
couple different trainings on there, and we hope to do more and more. I really hope this one is not on there, but,
It'll be on
The battery's
Central
almost running
Sussex
out.
website, and there is a form on the training page that if you watch one of the videos, you can download it, fill it out, and send it to your coordinator, and you get hours.
right. All right, any other questions?
I have a question, because of, sometimes you're supposed to visit your kid once a month. If that's not happening, do you have the right to say to one of us that's not doing it, we can't use you anymore now?
Do I? So,
No, or OCA?
well, there's a program director, so I assume the chain of command that has happened up until this point will continue to occur, except that there will be a little more oversight, like I'm really encouraging Gwen to meet with her coordinators statewide on a regular basis. So she's gonna have a lot more direct knowledge. That will be worked on if there's, volunteers that are doing an exceptional job, some that maybe need a little support, more support. They will work within the program. Gwen, I will be doing supervision with her. If she comes to me and says, this is a problem, I want to terminate this CASA, this is the reasons, and I say, okay, I think those are valid reasons, do what you need to do with your program. Okay.
Thank you, that's good.
All right. Well, thank you very much for having me. I can't believe I didn't lose my voice.
Just while she's out on maternity, yes.
Can I ask, okay, there's a couple of things that came up. I was getting Just a handout from the last visit I did. On all access.
That's all good.
It's nice meeting you. So I'm just going to find out.
Why? Try it again.
And then email her, she'll do this 10 minutes later.
When you get your new order.
Okay,
Which I did.
okay, okay.
She said to reach out to you.
Okay.
I don't know.
I don't know if I'll be there that day for the May one, but I don't know. I think I'll be on vacation, but if I'm not, I'll try to get on state park.
Yeah, no, is there any, it has to get into the system.
I mean, I think if I send an email saying,
Do not put in the child.
yeah, sure, just email me to.
So you put in your now confirmed email.
Friday, no.
See what my schedule is.
Maybe next week.
Sure, write down your name and phone number, I'll have it in my, but I'm not sure, I've got so much company that comes, I didn't sign up for anything, wait to see what was gonna happen.
So is there any questions?
I don't know.
So I haven't, I don't know how to, if exposed to what's going on, I guess I
Let me reach out to you.
I remembered your name, Andrea, but all of a sudden when I first saw you, I said, that was Angel. And now then I remember. I was like, oh gosh, my Angel. Missy, I have 2 questions.
Sure.